Shit, boy, RP on the track.
Yo, what going on, big family? It's your dog, the Ultra Melanac, coming to you live and direct once again from Charleston, South Carolina, aka the Holy City, you dig? And today we're going to debunk the slave trade again for 2018, you feel me? Hopefully, a lot of y'all have already seen our first video on debunking the slave trade. It's a very, very informative video. If you haven't seen it, please make sure you go and watch it. We'll put the link in the description below. Even though there's a lot of information on the internet going out around right now and in books that you can read, really debunking the slave trade, this really should be common sense right now. It seems that a lot of people still hold on to the fact of that African slavery or the transatlantic slave trade. When we discuss this topic and we say, well, most of us are not descended from African slaves, people get offended by that. It's like, y'all want to be descendants of African slaves. We're not denying our history. We're breaking down the truths and separating them from the lies, because see, these people had to lie to us in order to steal this land. In order to properly take over this land, they had to steal an identity. This is war, you dig? So what's the first thing the colonists had to do if they wanted this place? They had to come and remove the indigenous populations from this place. Either enslave them, kill them, assimilate them. They had to do something to displace the indigenous populations of America in order to colonize it. And not just America. Any place that is being colonized. I don't understand why y'all would think America would be any different than Africa, or any different than Australia or Tasmania or Polynesia or the Philippines. Why would America be any different? Why would America accept the transport of all of these slaves to make up its black population when Australia didn't, when Tasmania didn't, Melanesia? You dig? All of these places are places in Africa, but we're not going to get into that right now. We just want y'all to realize that we are not denying our history one bit. We know that we were enslaved, and we know that that slavery that we were subject to back in those days, that we are still subject to today. It's just that the terminology is changed a little bit. Back in the day, they call us slaves. Nowadays, they call us citizens, or they call us employees, or whatever, or whatnot. You dig what I'm saying? Physically, you can't go in your front yard and take a leak without these people coming and taking you to jail. They make the rules for you. So if you look up the term, the definition of enslavement, you are the definition of a slave physically. Now, hopefully, mentally, you're not a slave. You dig? Hopefully, mentally, you got rid of that slave mentality. But hey, who knows? The ones of y'all running around denying true logic are still slaves mentally also. You slaves physically and mentally. So today let's talk about the actual institute of slavery. We're not going to delve into all of the stuff that we delved into in the last video. Today let's deal with the institute of slavery, and let's deal with the Back to Africa movement, the shipping of our people to Africa. Or let's deal with the island movement, when they displaced the mainland indigenous so-called black man and ship them off to the islands, or ship them to South America, or just ship them to the middle of the Atlantic Ocean to their death. So let's talk about all of these things, right? Because I think the biggest misconception is what slavery actually was. I don't think, and we don't think, that things were that different back then than they are now. So let's come with some facts. We right here in the South, and I know there's a lot of people out there in the South too, but we're going to speak from the point of South Carolina, because I don't know Georgia's history or Virginia's history or Florida's history like I know my own history right here. You dig? So that's what I gonna deal with here, and hopefully y'all from different states can drop some comments and let us know what happened in y'all states, outside of this Wikipedia, which y'all know from y'all people, you dig? All right, so dealing with here in South Carolina, I know that most of the white colonists here did not own slaves. You feel me? All right, so out of 100% of white people in the South in the let's say 1850s, right? Less than 5% of them owned slaves. You feel me? So think about that. Less than 5% of the white population owned slaves. Cool. Now let's think about how much slaves did this 5% of the white population own. Out of that 5%, 90% of them owned 20 or less slaves. They owned 20 or less slaves. All right, so think about how few a number that's not, like I said, we dealing with South Carolina, but think about how few a number of slaves that are owned. Then you had the top tier that owned hundreds of slaves, or maybe up to 1,000 with these major plantations or major networks. So the logic that you need to come about with that is the fact that the plantation turned into the corporation. It's no different today because less than 5% of the population owns the power. They own the corporation. They own the ability to employ, or should we say employ or enslave? They own the ability to employ workers. That's the same ability that the plantation owners had back in the day. Slavery was not a good thing for free white people, especially not poor free white people who didn't own some good pieces of land that they can grow a lot of food and take care of themselves and large families. Slavery was not a good thing for those white folks. If they needed money, where would they go? Right? Because the other places had slaves. So it's not like these regular white folks can go out and just find a job when all of the corporations were hiring slaves. All right. And I say hiring slaves because the idea of being a slave in this aspect is being a corporate slave, is being a worker. Now, there is chattel slavery. You know what I'm saying? There is chattel slavery. That type of slavery is an incarcerated form of slavery. So you have us, the so-called free citizens of the United States, right? We were the regular slave population back then. Doesn't matter if you're white or black. The person who gets up out of bed that goes to work for a corporation in comparison to the 1800s is a slave. All right. Now, the chattel form of slavery will have to be compared to the people in Charleston County Jail or the people in Lieber Penitentiary Prison. You dig? So the people who were experiencing chattel slavery should be compared to the people who are incarcerated in prison. Those people did not make babies. All right. People in prison don't make babies. We have to keep reiterating that in y'all head to understand that you are not descendant of a person who was subject to chattel slavery. 9 times out of 10, you are not the descendant of a person who was subjected to chattel slavery. Understand that. That's a very big thing to understand in your history, all right? Now, the art of enslaving us came through assimilation and it came through war. All right. It's not like they just came and they locked a bunch of people up in shackles. Nah, they came and they started to pick sides and separate and created division between indigenous lands and then set up institutions. Right. All right. After these institutions were set up and luxuries were given to certain groups, then these people fought each other for those luxuries. Pretty much. That's how it happened. And that's what's going on today. We fight each other for these good jobs that we can live these luxury lives. All right. So you ever wonder to yourself why, you know, I know here in Charleston we used to have the Coca-Cola plant, right? Or the steel plant, the steel mill, the nuclear plant. You dig, where people go to work. Why is it called a steel plant or a nuclear plant or Coca-Cola plant, right? Plant is an abbreviation for plantation. So when you get up and you go to work to the Coca-Cola plant, it's no different than you getting up and going to work at the plantation. I know they say that my family was subject to a form of slavery in the 1800s, but I also know that these people had the capability to get up and go to work every day, and they brought their ass home every night. You dig what I'm saying? They did not sleep at that job. You dig? They had the ability to go home and lay down with their wives, chill with their family. Now, and I got not gonna say life was great for these people. Nah, life wasn't great because they had rulers who were foreigners. You dig? Just like we got right now in your government ruling you from they foreigners. You dig? So it's no different. People got a big misconception of that slavery, all right? Now, it's a lot of things that we debunk that we still might need to touch on. You know, we know that here in South Carolina that the so-called black man outnumbered every other person in South Carolina in the 1800s. We were the majority race right here in South Carolina 200 years ago. Things that make you say, what happened? Why are we not the majority race here in South Carolina anymore? And the first thing is because of war. They came young for 200 years, since the 1500s. You dig? Fighting our people, killing our people off of this land, separating, causing division between our people. They didn't really get a stronghold in South Carolina. It took 200 something years. They have done wrote letters back to Spain like, look, young, we can't take this place. These people fight too hard. These people too individualized. They ain't not going to accept our rule. It took hundreds of years of war for these people to enslave us in the manner of what they did. You feel me? All right. Now, when we think about it in that aspect, let's fast forward to 1790, the first census and all of that. We understand that even at that point, that we still outnumbered our white counterparts. So like I said, what happened? Well, after all of these census reports and stuff coming out, and these people tried to create a greater stronghold before the Civil War, because all of the wars are planned. So what they were trying to do is set the steps and set the foundations. The Civil War they wouldn't stand a leg in the Civil War if they had let the so-called black population remain in the South during the time of the Civil War. So what did they do? They displaced a lot of the black population. They killed them through diseases. And what they did is they had that Back to Africa movement, Back to Island movement, where they shipped thousands of us to Liberia saying, yeah, let's start a new colony. Let's start a new colony in Africa for y'all who supposedly descendants from Africans, which they knew these people were not descendants from Africans. Africans are similar to us through race, all right? So they used that as a basis to send some unknowing people. And maybe these people knew, because let me tell you one big thing. These people did know. I want to correct that, you dig? These people knew that they were from here at this time, and they knew that they did not want to go to a land that was not their land. They had to be coerced. They had to be forced into going to Africa or going to the depths in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. You dig? So what these slave owners did, they formed a group called the American Colonial Society. I think he is ACS, something like that. I ain't gonna put him up on the screen, but I think that's what he is, the American Colonial Society. All right. What the American Colonial Society did was they took these people who were subjected to stuff like chattel slavery, right? And they say, look, yeah, if you want to be free, we got a deal for you. We can ship you to Africa. We can give you weapons. We can give you provisions. What you have to do is go to Africa, kill off the indigenous people there, and form a state of your own. And they did. And the place is now called Liberia, and there's a lot of other places in Africa that were formed out of that way. Now, and I'm not going to tell you that the bulk of Liberians are indigenous Americans. No, that would be stupid. That would be like saying the bulk of indigenous black Americans are Africans. So that's not what we're going to say. We're going to say that a couple thousand of our indigenous black Americans were shipped to Africa. They ended up procreating within the African genome. So their descendants would be mostly African, you dig? Liberia is a created entity that's created by some slave owners in the United States of America who decided to ship these black folks, these so-called black folks, to Liberia, you dig? Now you got to ask yourself, why would they put up so much money? First, before we even get into that, understand, let's do some logic. Grammar, logic, and rhetoric, right? So let's do some logic. They say they sent 4,500, I think, slaves from South Carolina to Liberia through the Atlantic, right? Now, out of that 4,500, and this is over a period of 1820 to 1843, you think? So, 4,500 slaves over a period of 23 years. Out of those 4,500 slaves, less than 1,000 of them boys survived. Disease killed them boy. Now, they did this back to Africa thing all throughout the 19th century. So they probably shipped, 10, 20, 30,000. I don't know, and I don't know how much of them boys survived. But the biggest thing is that if you research this, that those so-called immigrants from America to Africa had the highest mortality rate in history. There's no other group that experienced a mortality rate as high as the so-called black folks being shipped from America to Africa. Now, when this so-called slavery first came about, what was it? 1500s, 1600s, right? 1700s. So as we progress another 100 years, technology should have gotten better, right? Not worse. Technology should have got better to the point where we could have ensured that most of the immigrants on these boats would have survived a trip across the Atlantic. So if we couldn't survive a trip in the 1800s and the 1840s, if we couldn't make it to another place and ensure that we live another 5 years, that we don't die from disease, that our body been end up so weak from being on a boat for that long, our bodies can barely move, you dig? Then how could you even see that these people were shipped from Africa to America and survived? Doesn't make any sense at all. You dig what I'm saying? Y'all excuse the phone ringing. It's not that. Forget to cut the ring off. But still, y'all get the point that I'm making with that right there, that we making. Hopefully we operating as one. We're not saying we right on everything, but if 385,000 slaves were shipped from Africa to America, how much of them boys survived, right? And then out of that, then all of them boys, mostly men, you know what I'm saying? So they had to recreate within the American genome, you dig? So their descendants would be indigenous Americans. The one person in your ancestry tree of African descent doesn't make all of y'all African. That's retarded. That's just like one person, one white person being in my genome don't make me a white person, you dig? And the fact of the matter is, most of the people, we do ancestry research. We actually do it. Me and my cousins, my family, we do it for other people. We've seen tons and tons and tons of ancestry trees. We hadn't really found people being shipped from Africa. Seeing people being shipped from Europe. We seeing indentured servitude. I mean, we talking about even in the white side. We see our people being shipped from here to the islands, to the Caribbean, to Trinidad, Tobago, you dig? We see our people being shipped from here to Africa. And so, like I said, why? The last thing we're going to touch bases on right quick is why. They had to displace the so-called black person out of the South because they knew that they were going to enter a civil war. The Civil War was orchestrated, all right? The purpose of the war is to bring people together. We deal with the dialectic. So in the dialectic, you got three phases, You got the thesis, right, which is the first. Then you got the antithesis, and then you got the synthesis where they meet in the middle. So the purpose of the Civil War was to further assimilate or unite the United States even further into a control by the government. The Civil War was fought over strong central government versus states' rights. The South wanted the states' rights, right? Cool. The North wanted central rights. Had nothing to do with slavery, right? So, and the North wanted a strong central government because that way one location, one group of people can control a whole nation. You feel me? So, of course, these big governments want a strong centralized government. All right, they don't want the rights to be into the arms of the people. With so much so-called black people being in the South, if they remain here, they would have got to enjoy a lot of the freedoms, you think, because the war would have been a little bit more lopsided with that so-called black element remaining here. So, in our opinion, they started to displace these so-called black people before the Civil War even started, you dig? Because it would have made the situation a whole lot different. Now, understand the black folks, the so-called black folks here, didn't want to go. They were coerced. They were given money. They were given guns. They were saying, look, yeah, we know this y'all land, but we give y'all opportunity if y'all go, yeah, and kill the people. And I don't respect them boy that went and kill other people and train and displace these people in Africa, these so-called black people in Africa. I don't respect none of that. You dig? You know what I'm saying? That ain't no different than them boy coming, yeah, and doing the same thing. All right. But the Civil War was not fought over slavery. Slavery had nothing to do with the Civil War. You dig what I'm saying? The Civil War was fought in order to build a strong, centralized government here in America, to make the government have absolute rule. And that's what ended up happening. You dig? But like I said, y'all let us know what y'all think in the comments down below. You know what I'm saying? I don't think I missed out on any specific points. Let me think right quick, you know. I think we touched bases on most of the important things of the fact that, it would be impossible to ship 385,000 people from America, who are mostly men, and have them create a society of their own. And not only that, a lot of these so-called black societies in America, outside of South Carolina, they say happened from a shipwreck with 10, 20 people, men. These one African person in your genome does not make your group African. And I'm not saying that we wouldn't pick up some elements from their culture. If there was elements of their culture that were beneficial to us as being smart people, I guess we would take those elements of those cultures and infuse them with our own. Nothing wrong with that, you dig what I'm saying? The fact of the matter is the so-called slave trade is fake. It's a lie. The purpose of it was to steal your land. And I'll tell you what, physically today, we still in the same position that we were in 200 years ago. If you don't believe me, go in your front yard and take a leak and see what happened to you. Go sit in your front yard and smoke a blunt and see what happened to you. Go drive with a beer in your hand and see what happened to you. You know what I'm saying? These people have total control over you, over our society. You dig? The only thing we can be free at in this point is in our mind. And hopefully if we get free in our mind and we free our spirit, at some point we can free ourselves from this physical slavery. You dig what I'm saying? But don't be confused, man. You are not the descendant of an African slave. And if you are a descendant of an African slave, we'd like to know about it. Y'all post it down in the comment, because we ain't never seen one. We ain't never seen anybody with proof of having a descendant from Africa. So we would definitely like to see that. If anybody got some of that information, y'all want to drop down below. Hey, peace out. This your dog, the Ultra Melanite, signing out for 2018, debunking the slave trade once again. If y'all didn't see our first video, make sure y'all watch our first video, debunking the slave trade. That's where we get into the nuts and bolts of slavery. You dig what I'm saying? Y'all hold them down, all right? Peace.